The silence in the house was deafening, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that usually brought comfort, but now felt like a countdown to something terrible. My hands trembled as I stared at the cold cup of coffee, the dark liquid mirroring the dread swirling inside me. They thought they had won. They believed they had broken me completely, that I would simply accept my fate. But they underestimated the fury that could bloom in the heart of a seemingly docile woman, a fury that was now my only companion. If you truly love your sister, subscribe now. I had always been the good daughter, the one who followed the rules, the one who never caused a fuss. Aaliyah, that was me, always striving for their approval, forever seeking validation in their eyes. My sister, Serafina, reveled in my apparent docility, often using it as a weapon to belittle me in front of our parents. It was a dynamic that had been in place for as long as I could remember. Serafina, the golden child, effortlessly charming and perpetually praised, and me, constantly striving, constantly falling short. Our parents, especially our mother, reinforced this dynamic at every turn. Serafina could do no wrong, while I was always subject to her criticism, her judgment, her thinly veiled disdain. I accepted it, believing that one day, if I worked hard enough, if I proved myself worthy enough, their love would be mine too. How naive I was. The cracks in this carefully constructed facade began to appear subtly at first. Small comments, dismissive gestures, things I could almost convince myself I was imagining. But then came the undeniable moments, the private conversations I accidentally overheard, the looks exchanged between my parents and sister when they thought I wasn't watching. The realization dawned slowly, a chilling understanding that I wasn't loved, I was merely tolerated. Worse, I was a means to an end. The breaking point came on my 28th birthday. I had planned a small dinner, hoping for a moment of genuine connection with my family. Instead, I received a gift wrapped in barbed wire, a cruel joke delivered with a saccharine smile. Serafina presented it with a flourish, a small, innocuous-looking box tied with a bright pink ribbon. Inside was a USB drive. When I plugged it into my laptop, I expected pictures, maybe a slideshow of embarrassing childhood memories. What I found instead was a recording, an audio file labeled simply Family Chat. Curiosity piqued. I pressed play. The first voice I heard was my mother's, her tone sharp and condescending. Honestly, I don't know why we bother with Aaliyah. She's so predictable, so easy to manipulate. My blood ran cold. Then came my father's voice, equally dismissive. She's useful, though. Her trust fund is about to mature. We need to make sure we secure that money for Serafina's business. And finally, Serafina's voice, dripping with venomous glee. Don't worry, I have a plan. She's so desperate for your approval, she'll do anything we say. The recording went on, detailing their scheme to bleed me dry, to use my inheritance for their own selfish purposes, to discard me once they had what they wanted. The knife twisted deeper with each word, each calculated phrase, each betrayal of trust. The person I trusted most was one of them, my own flesh and crimson. I sat there, stunned, the room spinning around me. The carefully constructed world I had believed in, shattered into a million pieces. The family I had loved, the people I had dedicated my life to pleasing, were revealed to be nothing more than manipulative users, willing to sacrifice my happiness for their own gain. The pain was unbearable, a crushing weight that threatened to suffocate me. But beneath the pain, a flicker of something else ignited, a spark of defiance, a burning desire for retribution. They had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had thought I was too naive to see through their lies. They were wrong, so very wrong. The USB drive still sat in my laptop, a malevolent little rectangle radiating poison into the room. Sleep evaded me that night, and the grandfather clock downstairs became my personal tormentor, each tick a hammer blow against my sanity. How could they? How could the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally harbor such coldness, such calculated cruelty? I replayed the audio file over and over, each listen peeling back another layer of the illusion I had so desperately clung to. The faces of my parents, once a source of comfort and security, now appeared grotesque, twisted by greed and malice. Serafina's laughter echoed in my ears, a mocking symphony of betrayal. The next morning, I confronted them. I walked into the dining room, the USB drive clutched in my hand like a weapon. They were all there, my mother, my father, and Serafina, gathered around the breakfast table, their faces alight with an unsettling cheerfulness. "Happy belated birthday, darling," my mother chirped, her eyes gleaming with false warmth. "We were just discussing your trust fund. We have such exciting plans for it." I slammed the USB drive onto the table. The clatter silenced them. "I know," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "I know everything." The cheerfulness vanished, replaced by a flicker of panic in their eyes. Serafina was the first to speak, her voice dripping with practiced innocence. "Aaliyah, what are you talking about?" I pressed play on my phone, the incriminating audio filling the room. Their faces crumbled as the recording unfolded, their carefully constructed facade of familial affection disintegrating before my eyes. My mother's face turned an alarming shade of red, my father's jaw tightened, and Serafina's eyes narrowed with venom. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening.
"How could you?" I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "How could you do this to me?" My mother was the first to recover, her voice regaining its usual sharp edge. "Don't be ridiculous, Aaliyah. You're being hysterical. You must have misunderstood." "Misunderstood?" I cried, incredulous. "I heard you! I heard all of you! You were planning to steal my inheritance!" My father stepped forward, his tone shifting to one of paternal concern. "Aaliyah, darling, we were just trying to help you. You're not good with money. We were worried you'd squander it." "Help me?" I scoffed. "By bleeding me dry and then discarding me? Is that your idea of help?" Serafina remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor, a smirk playing on her lips. "Aaliyah," my mother said, her voice pleading now, "please don't do this. Think of the family. Think of what this will do to our reputation." "Reputation?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You care more about your reputation than you do about me? About your own daughter?" The argument escalated, voices rising, accusations flying. I pleaded, I begged, I reasoned, hoping against hope that they would show some remorse, some sign of regret. But there was nothing, only cold denial and calculated manipulation. They tried to gaslight me, to convince me that I was imagining things, that I was overreacting, that I was being ungrateful. But I refused to back down. I had heard the truth, and I could no longer pretend. Finally, defeated and heartbroken, I stormed out of the house, vowing never to return. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of grief and anger, bouncing between hotels, the betrayal replaying itself like a broken record in my mind. Sleep became a luxury, and when it came, it was plagued by nightmares of my family's treachery. I tried to talk to friends, to seek solace in their support, but I found it difficult to explain the depth of my pain. How could I convey the feeling of being utterly unloved, of being betrayed by the very people who were supposed to protect me? I felt isolated, alone, adrift in a sea of despair. I considered cutting them off, going to the media, going scorched earth, but I knew there were legal ramifications. During one particularly sleepless night, an idea began to form in my mind. It started as a tiny seed of resentment, but it quickly grew into a burning desire for retribution. I wouldn't let them get away with this. I wouldn't let them destroy my life and walk away unscathed. I would make them pay. But how? I was just one person, and they were a powerful, manipulative force. I needed a plan, a strategy, something that would level the playing field. I began to research, devouring articles and books on psychology, manipulation, and revenge. I learned about their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, the things they valued most. Their reputation, their social standing, their wealth. These were their Achilles' heels, and I would exploit them all.
The first step was to gather evidence.
I knew that the audio recording was just the tip of the iceberg. There had to be more. More evidence of their deceit, their lies, their manipulation. I started subtly investigating their affairs, digging into their finances, their business dealings, their personal lives. It was a slow, painstaking process, but I was determined. I spent hours poring over documents, tracking down old acquaintances, piecing together the puzzle of their treachery. Slowly but surely, the truth began to emerge. A dark and twisted web of lies, corruption, and betrayal. I discovered that Serafina's business was built on a foundation of fraud and embezzlement, that my father had been engaging in shady dealings for years, and that my mother was a master manipulator, pulling the strings behind the scenes. The more I uncovered, the more determined I became. This wasn't just about my inheritance anymore. It was about justice, about holding them accountable for their actions, about exposing them for the monsters they truly were. The silent rage grew. The weight of their betrayal was a physical thing, a crushing presence on my chest that stole my breath and left me gasping for air. I found myself drawn to the darkest corners of my mind, revisiting every slight, every manipulation, every moment of calculated cruelty. I saw their faces in my dreams, their smiles twisted into grotesque masks of deceit. The line between reality and nightmare blurred, and I struggled to hold on to my sanity. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped caring. The world around me faded into a muted, gray landscape, devoid of joy or hope. One evening, I found myself standing on the edge of a bridge, the dark water swirling below, its surface reflecting the distorted image of my own despair. The wind howled around me, a mournful lament that seemed to echo the emptiness in my soul. The thought crossed my mind, a fleeting whisper of oblivion, a tempting escape from the pain. It would be so easy. Just one step, and it would all be over. No more betrayal, no more heartache, no more struggling against the relentless tide of their malice. The water looked so inviting, so calm, so final. As I leaned forward, a single tear traced a path down my cheek, mingling with the rain. In that moment, I saw myself clearly, a broken, defeated woman, on the verge of succumbing to the darkness. I saw their victory, their smug satisfaction at having finally broken me completely. And something inside me snapped. A surge of anger coursed through my veins, pushing back the despair, igniting a fire in my belly. They wouldn't win. I wouldn't let them have the satisfaction of seeing me destroyed. I wouldn't give them the power to dictate my fate. With newfound resolve, I stepped back from the edge, my body trembling, but my spirit unbroken. The rain continued to fall, washing away the tears, cleansing the pain. I would use their cruelty as fuel, their betrayal as motivation. I would become the architect of their downfall. I turned away from the bridge, my steps faltering at first, then gaining strength with each stride. I had a plan to execute, a score to settle, a debt to collect. The world no longer seemed gray, but crackling with energy, with possibilities. I hailed a taxi and gave the driver an address, a place where I could begin to rebuild my life, to forge my own path, to plot my revenge. The spark was lit, and I was ready to burn. I needed allies, people who were trustworthy and could help me along the way. I reached out to some old college friends, people who I knew were incredibly smart. It was time to put the plan into motion and turn the tables on my wretched family. I spent days meticulously organizing the information I had gathered, piecing together the puzzle of their corruption. I created a detailed timeline, mapping out their actions, their lies, their betrayals. I identified their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities, the pressure points that would cause the most damage. I knew that exposing their fraudulent business dealings would be a significant blow, but it wouldn't be enough. I needed something more, something that would strike at the heart of their carefully constructed image, something that would shatter their reputation beyond repair. I delved deeper into their personal lives, searching for hidden secrets, for skeletons in their closets. I discovered a series of illicit affairs, gambling debts, and questionable investments, each one a potential weapon in my arsenal. I realized that my mother's perfect persona of the doting socialite was a complete fabrication. She had been quietly funneling money into offshore accounts to finance her gambling addiction. It was sick and twisted. My father was in just as deep. I learned he was in massive debt to some very dangerous people, people who wouldn't hesitate to get violent. And Serafina? Her business wasn't the only thing that was fraudulent.
I had also learned she had been unfaithful to her husband with multiple men, something that would devastate him and their picture-perfect marriage.
As I collected more and more evidence, I realized that their entire lives were built on a foundation of lies and deceit. They had manipulated and exploited everyone around them, including each other. Their relationships were transactional, their affections conditional, their loyalties non-existent. They were monsters, pure and simple, and I was determined to expose them for who they truly were. I knew the risks were high. There were powerful, ruthless people, and they wouldn't hesitate to retaliate. But I was no longer afraid. I had nothing left to lose. I had lost my family, my trust, my sense of self. The only thing that remained was my burning desire for justice. I reached out to a lawyer, someone I could trust with the information. I told him everything, laying out the evidence, explaining my plan. He listened intently, his expression growing more serious with each revelation. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes narrowed. "This is a dangerous game you're playing, Aaliyah," he said. "They won't go down without a fight." "I know," I replied, my voice firm, "but I'm ready. I'm not backing down." He nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "I'm in. But you need to be careful. They are not to be underestimated." With his help, I finalized the plan. The exact day they tried to end me, I exposed the truth. I became a ghost in their lives, a phantom presence they couldn't detect. I moved out of the hotels and into a small, unassuming apartment, a safe house from which I could launch my operation. I changed my appearance, dyeing my hair a dark, unremarkable brown, trading my designer clothes for simple, anonymous attire. I even went so far as to get subtle cosmetic alterations to reshape my nose and jawline, ensuring that I could walk past them on the street without being recognized. I enrolled in a computer forensics course, learning how to recover deleted data, track IP addresses, and break through firewalls. I needed to be able to protect myself, to ensure that they couldn't trace my actions back to me. I smiled. I played their game, but I was recording everything. Every phone call, every email, every social media post. I used burner phones and encrypted messaging apps, masking my digital footprint, leaving no trace of my presence. I even planted hidden cameras in their homes and offices, capturing their every move, their every conversation. The cameras were cleverly disguised as everyday objects, a smoke detector, a pen holder, a potted plant. They were completely oblivious, convinced that they were safe, that they were in control. Little did they know, I was watching them, documenting their every transgression. I was building a case, a rock-solid case that would bring them crashing down. One afternoon, while reviewing the footage from the hidden camera in my father's office, I stumbled upon something truly shocking. He was meeting with a known criminal, a man with a long history of violence and intimidation. They were discussing a deal, a shady business venture that involved laundering money through offshore accounts. As I listened to their conversation, my blood ran cold. My father was involved in something far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about stealing my inheritance anymore. This was about criminal conspiracy, about putting innocent lives at risk. I knew I had to act quickly. I couldn't let him get away with this. I immediately contacted my lawyer, relaying the information I had gathered. He was stunned, but he didn't hesitate. He advised me to contact the authorities, to turn over the evidence to the FBI. But I hesitated. I didn't trust the authorities. I feared that my family's influence would reach even into the highest levels of law enforcement, that they would find a way to bury the evidence to protect themselves. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I downloaded the audio and video files from the hidden camera, making multiple copies, storing them on encrypted hard drives in secure locations. I then anonymously leaked the information to a local news reporter, a journalist known for his investigative reporting and his unwavering commitment to the truth. I knew that he would do everything in his power to expose my father's criminal activities. The reporter, a seasoned professional named Ben, contacted me through encrypted channels, seeking more information. I provided him with additional evidence, guiding him through the complex web of my father's financial dealings. Ben was relentless, digging deeper and deeper, uncovering more and more dirt. He was like a dog with a bone, refusing to let go until he had exposed the whole truth. Meanwhile, I continued to monitor my mother and Serafina, gathering evidence of their misdeeds.
I discovered that my mother was planning to sell off some of her assets, transferring the funds to a secret account in the Cayman Islands. She was preparing to flee the country to escape the consequences of her actions. I knew I had to stop her. I contacted the bank where she held her accounts, alerting them to her suspicious activity. I provided him with evidence of her gambling addiction and her attempts to conceal her assets. The bank launched an internal investigation, freezing her accounts and preventing her from transferring any funds. My mother was furious, but there was nothing she could do. She was trapped. Serafina was proving to be a more elusive target. She was careful, meticulous, covering her tracks at every turn. But I was patient. I knew that everyone has a weakness, a vulnerability that can be exploited. I focused on her marriage, on the cracks that were beginning to appear in her perfect facade.
I learned that her husband was growing suspicious of her, that he had begun to suspect her infidelity. I anonymously sent him copies of the photos and videos I had gathered, exposing her affair in all its sordid detail. He was devastated, heartbroken, and enraged. He confronted her, and their marriage imploded. Serafina's world crumbled around her. Her business was in ruins, her reputation was shattered, and her marriage was over. She had lost everything. The anticipation was building, a slow burn that ignited my soul. I knew the final strike was coming, and it would be soon. The dominoes were falling. My father's criminal dealings were now front-page news. Ben, the reporter, had done his job. My mother was financially crippled, unable to access her ill-gotten gains. Serafina was a pariah, her marriage and business in tatters. But I wasn't finished yet. I wanted to see them truly suffer, to experience the same pain and humiliation they had inflicted upon me. I wanted them to lose everything, and I knew just how to make it happen. Their biggest weakness? They thought they were untouchable. They believed that their wealth and power would protect them from any consequences, that they could always buy their way out of trouble. But they were wrong. This time, there would be no escape. I decided to lure them all to the same place, at the same time, for a final reckoning. I crafted a letter, a carefully worded invitation that played on their greed and their vanity. I sent it to each of them, using untraceable methods, ensuring that they would have no idea who it came from. The letter promised a reconciliation, a chance to mend our fractured family, to put the past behind us. It hinted at a large sum of money, a previously undisclosed inheritance that was waiting to be claimed. I knew they wouldn't be able to resist. Their avarice was too strong, their desire for wealth too insatiable. The location I chose was an old family estate, a sprawling mansion that had been abandoned for years. It was the place where I had spent my childhood summers, a place filled with happy memories that had since been tainted by their betrayal. It was the perfect setting for a final confrontation, a place where the ghosts of the past would come back to haunt them. I spent days preparing the estate, transforming it into a stage for my elaborate revenge fantasy. I rigged the house with hidden cameras and microphones, capturing every angle, every sound. I wanted to document their reactions, to witness their downfall in real time. I also planted evidence throughout the house, carefully selected items that would incriminate them in their various crimes. A ledger detailing my father's money laundering activities, a recording of my mother confessing to her gambling addiction, photographs of Serafina with her various lovers. I wanted to make sure that when the authorities arrived, they would have no doubt about their guilt. On the day of the reunion, I watched from a hidden room as they arrived, one by one. My father was the first to arrive, his face etched with worry, his eyes darting around nervously. My mother followed shortly after, her demeanor cold and aloof, her expensive handbag clutched tightly in her hand. Serafina arrived last, her eyes red and puffy, her designer clothes rumpled and stained. They were all there, gathered in the same place, ready to walk into my trap. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, my palms sweating, as I prepared to unleash my carefully orchestrated plan. I activated the hidden cameras, the microphones, and the recording devices. The show was about to begin. I stepped out of the shadows, my face hidden behind a mask, my voice distorted by a voice changer. They turned to face me, their expressions a mixture of confusion, fear, and anger. "Welcome," I said, my voice a low, menacing growl. "I've been expecting you." The exact day they tried to end me was the day I pulled the trigger. "Welcome," I said, my voice a low, menacing growl.
the voice changer twisting it into something unrecognizable. "I've been expecting you." The masks of composure they wore so well began to crack. My father's carefully constructed facade of power flickered, replaced by a raw, naked fear. My mother's icy demeanor melted away, revealing the calculating, grasping woman beneath. And Serafina, stripped of her wealth and status, looked utterly lost, like a child abandoned in the woods. I pressed a button on a remote, and the screens around the room flickered to life, displaying the evidence I had so meticulously gathered. There was my father, conspiring with known criminals, discussing the laundering of money through offshore accounts. There was my mother, signing documents to transfer her assets to a secret account in the Cayman Islands. And there was Serafina, caught on camera with her various lovers, betraying her husband in the most intimate and degrading ways. The color drained from their faces as they watched their lives unravel before their eyes. What is this?" my father stammered, his voice trembling. "This is justice," I replied, my voice cold and unwavering. "This is the price you pay for your greed, your lies, your betrayal." I then played the recording of their conversation on the bridge, the one where they plotted my demise, where they discussed how much better their lives would be without me. A stunned silence filled the room as they listened to their own words, their own voices condemning them. My mother began to weep, tears streaming down her face, ruining her expensive makeup. Serafina sank to her knees, her body shaking with sobs. My father stood frozen, his eyes wide with disbelief, his mouth agape. You wouldn't," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "Oh, but I would," I said, my voice dripping with venom. "I am not the naive, trusting fool you once knew."
You created a monster, and now that monster is here to collect its due. I revealed the hidden cameras, pointing them out one by one, showing them that their every move, their every word had been recorded. I then revealed the evidence I had planted, the ledger detailing my father's criminal activities, the recording of my mother confessing to her gambling addiction, the photographs of Serafina with her lovers. I watched as their faces crumpled, as their lives shattered into a million pieces. The police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. I had anonymously tipped them off, providing them with the evidence they needed. "You," he screamed, his hands outstretched, ready to silence me. But I was ready for him. I stepped aside, and he stumbled, falling to the ground with a thud. The officers quickly restrained him, handcuffing his wrists behind his back. My mother and Serafina offered no resistance, their spirits broken, their wills crushed. As they were led away, I removed my mask, revealing my face to them for the first time. Their eyes widened in shock as they recognized me, their expressions a mixture of horror, disbelief, and regret. "Aaliyah," my mother gasped, her voice barely a whisper. I said nothing. I simply stared at them, my eyes filled with a cold, unwavering resolve. As they were escorted out of the house, I watched them go, knowing that I would never see them again. Their lives were over. Their reputations were ruined. Their fortunes were gone. They had lost everything. I walked through the empty house, surveying the damage I had wrought. The opulent furnishings, the expensive artwork, the lavish decorations, all of it seemed meaningless now, tainted by the lies and deceit that had permeated every corner of this place. I felt a sense of emptiness, a void that could never be filled. The revenge I had sought had come at a cost that I would have to bear for the rest of my life. The fallout was swift and devastating. My father's criminal empire crumbled, his assets seized, his reputation destroyed. He faced years in prison, his life reduced to a bleak existence behind bars. My mother was ostracized by society, her friends and acquaintances abandoning her, her social standing in tatters. She was left penniless and alone, forced to face the consequences of her actions. Serafina's business collapsed, her reputation ruined, her marriage over. She was left with nothing, stripped of her wealth, her status, and her sense of self. They had lost everything. Everything they had worked for, everything they had valued, was gone. And I, the person they had tried to destroy, was the one who had taken it all away. In the days and weeks that followed, I received countless calls and messages from reporters, lawyers, and law enforcement officials. I cooperated fully with the authorities, providing them with all the information I had gathered. I testified in court, recounting the events that had led to my family's downfall. I became a symbol of justice, a beacon of hope for those who had been wronged. But I knew that my revenge had not brought me true happiness. It had brought me satisfaction, yes, but it had also brought me pain, guilt, and a profound sense of loss. I sold the family estate, donating the proceeds to a charity that supported victims of abuse. I changed my name, severing all ties to my past. I moved to a new city, a place where no one knew me, where I could start over, free from the shadow of my family's legacy. I dedicated my life to helping others, volunteering at a local shelter, offering my support to those who had suffered similar traumas. I found solace in my work, in the knowledge that I was making a difference in the world. I never forgot what my family had done to me, but I refused to let their actions define me. I chose to focus on the future, on building a life of purpose, meaning, and compassion. They lost everything. I just smiled. But revenge isn't sweet. It's necessary. It's a survival mechanism, a way to reclaim your power when someone tries to take it away. It's not about hate. It's about justice. It's about sending a message that says, you can't do this to me. You can't get away with it. Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more justice.